Questions about, well, my own thing is anxiety and waves and waves and waves of anxiety rather than anything blissful in the last 6, 7 months. And trying to find ways uh, to calm that, to change the anxiety into something else, into something more pleasant. Anyway, that's basically the question is, how can one deal with those just overwhelming and constant anxiety, if that's what's happening?
But yes, anxiety can really come up throughout this process in very, very intense ways. And so I recognize your approach, and it's not uncommon at all. And I had the same idea as well. We have to the idea of having to change the anxiety or find relief from the anxiety, or that it was a problem that we have to cure. But I would argue that during this process, the emotional experiences that we have, the psychological experiences that we have, are a little different than quote unquote the average person who has anxiety. The reason is because the average person has anxiety, but they don't have a force awakened within them that's trying to push the anxiety out. So when you have anxiety, it's a little different than other people, and therefore you have to approach it a little differently, which means we recognize that there's a force trying to stir things up in us to get it out and exhausted and released. So rather than trying to change the anxiety or make it go away, we want to create context and an understanding of how can we exhaust this anxiety out. So we can sit with it and say, okay, the anxiety's here. This is what's happening. All right, maybe I've been carrying this type of thinking pattern and these emotional patterns for a long time, but let's exhaust it out. And the only way to exhaust it out is to uproot it. And that's what this process is trying to do, is trying to uproot it. And in order for it to be uprooted, we have to really experience it fully. So rather than trying to get it to be quiet, let's listen to it in a safe way. So journal out all of the anxious thoughts, sit in meditation, and the meditation doesn't have to be quiet. It can be a very noisy, anxious, uncomfortable meditation. But the meditation creates a space, a safe space for that anxiety to really express. And once it's said what it needs to say, eventually it's just like, well, there's nothing left to say. And it's exhausted. That energy has been burned up. And then that's when you can find a more sustainable period of peace where you may say that there's no longer anxiety really present. So this goes for anger, sadness, jealousy, rage. We want to give a space to all of these emotions to come up. Rather than trying to change them, we want to let them be here. They're not a problem at all. They're not a problem at all. It's, you could even do some more deeper work. How has anxiety benefited you? Maybe it's kept you on your toes during times where you needed to be. So like that, we can make friends with this anxiety and say, okay, you helped me during these difficult parts in my life. I appreciate you for being there, but now things are different. I don't need you here anymore. So thank you so much. And at your own pace, anxiety, know that, you can leave now. And then we just sit back and we let it come forth and be released. And we can do that with all of our psychological patterns, emotional patterns, etc. So I hope that's helpful, but know that you're not alone. Many people experience a lot of mental activity. And in some respects, we can get a little confused because we can say, well, I thought spiritual awakening was about a quiet mind. My mind's more noisy than ever. Well, I would argue that it's not just about being quiet. It's about really letting it all scream and talk and yell before the real quietude comes.